You are fired. Breaking news. Adam Pearce just fired Bron Breakker following his brutal attack on him backstage. Are you kidding me right now? Adam Pearce just fired Bron Breakker, the most dominant young superstar WWE has had in years, because he did exactly what any self-respecting wrestler should do when disrespected by management. This is absolute insanity, and I'm about to explain why this firing is either the biggest mistake WWE creative has made this decade or the most genius long-term storyline they've pulled off since The Authority. Bron Breakker just put Adam Pearce through a wall backstage, and instead of treating this like the main event storyline it deserves to be, WWE is reportedly writing him off television. The same company that spent years building Bron as the next big thing, as the second-generation star who was supposed to carry WWE into the future, just fired him for doing what Stone Cold Steve Austin made legendary in the Attitude Era. I'm furious. The locker room is reportedly in chaos, and you need to hear everything about why this situation is so much bigger than just a backstage attack. Let me set the scene for those who somehow missed the most shocking moment in recent WWE history. Bron Breakker, coming off weeks of frustration with how he's been booked, with how management has been holding him back despite being the most physically gifted athlete on the roster, snapped. He didn't just attack Adam Pearce, he destroyed him. We're talking about throwing the Raw general manager through equipment, spearing him through a backstage wall, and standing over him like an absolute monster while the entire locker room watched in horror. And you know what the worst part is? Bron was justified. Adam Pearce has been screwing with Bron's career for months, refusing to give him title opportunities he's earned, booking him in meaningless matches against jobbers, treating his Steiner like he's some random developmental talent instead of wrestling royalty. Bron Breakker is the son of Rick Steiner and the nephew of Scott Steiner. He's got more wrestling pedigree in his pinky finger than most of the roster combined. But instead of recognizing that Bron was making a statement, instead of building this into the next great anti-authority storyline that could define WrestleMania season, Adam Pearce comes out on Raw looking like he went through a car accident and announces that Bron Breakker is fired, effective immediately. No hearing, no suspension, no chance for Bron to explain himself or apologize, just straight up terminated. This is the same Adam Pearce who let Seth Rollins run roughshod over Raw for months without consequence. The same Adam Pearce who allowed the Judgment Day to terrorize the roster for years before finally doing anything about it. The same Adam Pearce who's been completely inconsistent with how he enforces rules and hands out punishments. But somehow, when Bron Breakker, who's been criminally underutilized and disrespected, finally stands up for himself, that's where Pearce draws the line? Let me ask you something right now in the comments. Do you think Bron Breakker deserved to be fired, or was Adam Pearce completely out of line? Because the wrestling world is split on this, and I need to know where the Wrestling Newsletter family stands. Now here's where things get really interesting, because there's backstage talk and I've got sources close to the situation that this firing isn't what it seems. There are whispers that this is all part of a larger storyline, that WWE is working everyone, and that Bron Breakker is going to show up where nobody expects him to. But if that's true, if this is all a work, then WWE is playing with fire, because you can't just fire your top young talent on television and expect the audience to stay invested when they think he's actually gone. The problem with modern wrestling is that we're so conditioned to think everything is a work that when something real happens, we can't tell the difference anymore. Is Bron really fired? Is this a storyline? Is he going to AEW? Is he taking time off to heal injuries? Nobody knows for sure, and that uncertainty is either brilliant storytelling or a complete disaster depending on how this plays out. Let's talk about what this means for Bron Breakker's career trajectory, because up until this moment, he was on the fastest rise to superstardom we've seen in years. The man won the NXT Championship not once but twice. He dominated the developmental brand like nobody since Samoa Joe. His matches were consistently the best on every takeover event. He had the look, the intensity, the athleticism, and most importantly, the pedigree to be WWE's next big thing. When he got called up to the main roster, everyone expected an immediate push to the main event scene. We expected him to be in the world title picture within 6 months. We expected WWE to capitalize on the Steiner legacy and create a new generation of dominance. Instead, what did we get? Bron stuck in the mid-card, having repetitive matches, cutting generic promos, and being treated like just another guy on the roster instead of the guy. And fans noticed. The IWC has been complaining for months about how WWE is wasting Bron Breakker. Fantasy booking has him winning the World Heavyweight Championship, feuding with main event talent, having legendary matches at WrestleMania. But creative kept him spinning his wheels, putting him in meaningless feuds that went nowhere, refusing to pull the trigger on the megastar push that everyone knew he deserved. So when Bron finally snapped and attacked Adam Pearce, it felt cathartic. It felt like a wrestler finally saying enough and taking matters into his own hands. It felt like the beginning of something special, something that could define his career and elevate him to that next level. And then WWE fired him. Just like that. Career potentially over. Here's a trivia question for the comments. Who was the last major WWE superstar to be fired on television, and did it help or hurt their career long term? I'm curious to see if anyone remembers some of the past instances of this storyline. Now let's discuss the nuclear fallout from this decision, because firing Bron Breakker doesn't just affect him, it affects the entire roster. Every wrestler backstage is watching this situation and taking notes. They're seeing that if you stand up to management, if you refuse to accept mediocre booking, if you demand the respect you deserve, you'll get fired. That's the message WWE just sent to their locker room, whether they intended to or not. This creates a chilling effect on the roster. Why would anyone take risks or push boundaries if they know they could lose their job? Why would anyone cut passionate, shoot-style promos if management is going to retaliate? Why would anyone try to break out of the mold WWE puts them in if the consequence is termination? Stone Cold Steve Austin became the biggest star in wrestling history by doing exactly what Bron Breakker just did, attacking his boss, refusing to follow the rules, and taking what he believed he deserved. The difference is that Vince McMahon understood how to book that story. He understood that the anti-authority figure is money in professional wrestling because fans relate to it. Everyone has a boss they want to stand up to. Everyone has felt held back by management. Stone Cold was their avatar, their champion against corporate oppression. Bron Breakker could have been the same thing for a new generation. But instead of running with it, instead of building him as the rebellious superstar who refuses to be held down, WWE fired him. They killed the story before it even began. They took what could have been a multi-year arc leading to massive WrestleMania moments and threw it in the garbage. Unless, and this is the big unless that has everyone talking, unless this is all part of the plan. Unless firing Bron Breakker is step one in a much larger storyline that's going to redefine Monday Night Raw. Let me explain what I think might be happening here, and you tell me in the comments if I'm crazy or if this actually makes sense. What if Bron Breakker's firing leads to a hostile takeover of WWE? What if he shows up on SmackDown claiming that he was never actually legally employed by Raw, therefore Adam Pearce had no authority to fire him? What if he starts recruiting other disgruntled superstars who feel held back by management and creates a faction of rebels who are going to take over WWE by force? Think about who could join him. Think about all the talented wrestlers who've been stuck in the mid-card despite being main event caliber. Think about how many people in the locker room probably sympathize with Bron's frustration. You could have the most dangerous faction in WWE history, led by a Steiner who's angry, motivated, and has nothing to lose. Or here's another possibility: what if this is WWE's way of writing Bron off television temporarily so he can return at the Royal Rumble as a surprise entrant? Imagine the pop when his music hits and everyone realizes he's back. Imagine him running through the entire field, eliminating multiple superstars, and pointing at the WrestleMania sign. That would be legendary. But here's my concern with both of these scenarios: they require WWE to commit to long-term storytelling, and we all know that's not their strength anymore. How many times have we seen WWE start a promising angle only to abandon it 2 weeks later because creative changed their mind? How many times have wrestlers been fired only to return with no explanation and no follow-up? Drop a comment telling me which of these scenarios you think is most likely, or if you have your own theory about where this Bron Breakker firing storyline is heading. Let's talk about Adam Pearce for a minute, because he's become one of the most polarizing figures in WWE despite being a non-wrestler. The Raw general manager role has always been tricky. You need someone who feels legitimate, who has enough wrestling credibility that fans respect them, but who's also willing to be a corporate mouthpiece when the story requires it. Adam Pearce has done that job admirably for the most part. He's believable in the role. He has a wrestling background that gives him credibility. He's not trying to steal the spotlight from the actual superstars. But here's the problem: he's also become boring. His character has no edge, no personality, no memorable traits that make him stand out from any other authority figure WWE has had over the years. When Bron Breakker attacked him, it was the most interesting Adam Pearce has been since taking the role. Finally, we had an authority figure who was vulnerable, who was in danger, who had real consequences for his decisions. Finally, the general manager position felt like it mattered in terms of the show's storylines instead of just being administrative background noise. And then Pearce comes out and fires Bron, which immediately makes him look weak. Instead of coming across as a tough authority figure who won't tolerate insubordination, he looks like someone who's scared of Bron Breakker and is using his corporate power to eliminate a threat he can't handle physically. That's not how you build a strong authority figure. That's how you create a coward who's going to get his comeuppance eventually. The smart play would have been for Adam Pearce to suspend Bron indefinitely, demand he go through anger management, and then have Bron refuse, leading to a longer, more drawn-out conflict. That way you keep Bron on television in some capacity, you build heat for his eventual return, and you don't risk losing audience investment by making them think he's actually gone for good. Here's a question I'm dying to know the answer to: do you think Adam Pearce is a good general manager, or would WWE be better off with someone else in that role? Let me know in the comments. Now let's address the elephant in the room that nobody wants to talk about: is WWE making the same mistake they made with so many other second-generation superstars? Think about all the wrestlers who had famous fathers or family members in the business who WWE failed to capitalize on properly. Think about how many times WWE tried to coast on legacy instead of building new stars. Bron Breakker should have been easy to get over. He's got the Steiner name. He's got an incredible look. The man is a specimen. He's got legitimate college football background that gives him mainstream credibility. He's got charisma and intensity that can't be taught. All WWE had to do was present him as an unstoppable force and let him wreck people. Instead, they got cute with his booking. They tried to make him earn his spot by having him work his way up slowly. They didn't want to be accused of pushing him too fast just because of his family name. So they overcorrected and held him back too much, which killed his momentum and made fans frustrated. The irony is that by firing him, whether it's a work or a shoot, WWE might have accidentally done the best thing for his career. Nothing builds sympathy and investment like a wrestler who was wronged by the company. When he eventually returns, whether it's in 2 weeks or 2 months, the crowd is going to be nuclear for him. They're going to want to see him succeed. They're going to want to see him get revenge on Adam Pearce and everyone else who held him back. This is a massive if WWE actually follows through and doesn't just forget about this storyline in 3 weeks like they usually do. Let me throw out some controversial booking ideas for how Bron Breakker's return should happen, and I want you to vote in the comments for which one you think would create the biggest impact. Option 1: Bron returns at the Royal Rumble, wins the whole thing, main events WrestleMania. Option 2: Bron shows up on SmackDown and claims he was never legally fired since he never signed a Raw-specific contract, creating a legal loophole that Triple H has to address. Option 3: Bron stays gone for 6 months, comes back completely unannounced during a random Raw, attacks Adam Pearce again, and dares him to fire him twice. Option 4: Bron appears in AEW for one night, cuts a promo about how WWE wasted him, then returns to WWE with all the leverage in contract negotiations. Option 5: Bron creates his own invasion angle by recruiting fired and released WWE wrestlers to storm the show and take over by force. Each of these options has potential to be incredible television or a complete disaster depending on execution. That's what makes this situation so fascinating and frustrating at the same time. Here's what I think is actually going to happen. Based on WWE's typical patterns and creative's track record, Bron Breakker will be gone for 2 to 4 weeks. There will be some segments with Adam Pearce looking nervous or Triple H having meetings about the Bron situation. Then Bron will show up either through the crowd or interrupting a segment, make it clear he's not going anywhere, and we'll get some kind of match stipulation where if he wins, he gets his job back. It's formulaic. It's predictable. But it's also effective if done right. The key is making sure Bron looks like an absolute monster when he returns. He can't come back acting apologetic or grateful for a second chance. He needs to return angrier, more dangerous, and more determined to take what he believes belongs to him. The match where he wins his job back should be brutal. I'm talking about a no disqualification match where Bron destroys whoever they put in front of him. Maybe it's against a wrestler who's acting as Adam Pearce's hired gun. Maybe it's against multiple opponents in a handicap match. Whatever it is, Bron needs to look untouchable. Quick trivia for the comments: what's the greatest fired wrestler returns for revenge storyline in WWE history? I've got my answer, but I want to hear yours. Let's talk about the locker room reaction to this firing, because that's another layer to this story that's absolutely fascinating. Reports are coming out that some wrestlers are furious about how this situation was handled. Not because they think Bron was right to attack Adam Pearce, but because they recognize that this sets a dangerous precedent for how WWE handles talent relations. If WWE can fire someone like Bron Breakker, a top prospect with unlimited potential, over a storyline attack on an authority figure, what's to stop them from firing anyone else who steps out of line? It creates an atmosphere of fear and uncertainty that's not conducive to creative risk-taking or compelling television. Other wrestlers are reportedly supportive of the firing, believing that there need to be consequences for actions, even in storyline terms. They argue that letting Bron attack management without serious repercussions would undermine Adam Pearce's authority and make the general manager role meaningless. Both sides have valid points, which is why this situation is so complicated. In a perfect world, WWE would use this firing as a way to create multiple compelling storylines: Bron's journey back to WWE, other wrestlers debating whether to stand with him or against him, Adam Pearce proving he's strong enough to make tough decisions, and management having to deal with the fallout of potentially mishandling a future star. But WWE isn't perfect, and we've seen them fumble similar situations countless times before. The question is whether they've learned from past mistakes or if they're about to repeat them with Bron Breakker. Here's something that's been bothering me about this entire situation: why did it take Bron this long to snap? He's been frustrated with his booking for months, according to Backstage reports. He's reportedly gone to management multiple times asking for better creative direction. He's done everything he's supposed to do as a professional, worked hard, stayed in incredible shape, performed at a high level in every match regardless of his position on the card. So why now? What was the specific incident that pushed him over the edge? Was it being left off a major premium live event? Was it watching someone less talented get the opportunities he deserved? Was it a personal confrontation with Adam Pearce that we didn't see on camera? Understanding Bron's motivation is crucial to making this storyline work. If fans don't understand why he attacked Pearce, they can't fully invest in his character or his journey. WWE needs to make sure they clearly establish what drove Bron to this point, otherwise it just looks like random violence for shock value. Let me ask you this in the comments: if you were Bron Breakker and you'd been underutilized and disrespected for months, would you have done the same thing? Would you have attacked Adam Pearce, or would you have handled it differently? Now here's the wildest theory I've heard about this situation, and it's so crazy that it might actually be true. What if Bron Breakker requested to be written off television temporarily? What if he went to creative and said he needed time away to heal some nagging injuries or to prepare for a character reboot, and they worked together to create this firing storyline as a way to explain his absence? That would actually make a lot of sense. It would explain why the firing happened so suddenly without building to it over several weeks. It would explain why WWE is being vague about whether this is a work or a shoot. And it would mean that everyone involved is on the same page about what comes next, which increases the likelihood of this storyline actually paying off properly. The wrestling business has always been built on secrets and misdirection. Maybe we're all being worked harder than we realize. Maybe Bron and WWE are laughing behind the scenes at how seriously everyone is taking this. Maybe the whole point is to create genuine uncertainty so that when Bron returns, the pop is even bigger because fans genuinely thought he might be gone for good. If that's the case, if this is all part of a carefully planned angle, then I've got to give WWE credit. They've successfully worked me and probably most of the wrestling world. But I'm not ready to give them that much credit yet. I need to see how this plays out over the next few weeks before I'm willing to call this genius instead of a disaster. Here's my final take on this entire situation, and then I want to hear your thoughts in the comments. Bron Breakker being fired, whether it's legitimate or storyline, represents everything that's right and wrong about modern WWE simultaneously. It's right because it creates genuine drama and uncertainty. It gives us something to talk about and debate. It makes the product feel unpredictable in a way it hasn't felt in years. It reminds us that in wrestling, sometimes the best stories come from real frustration and conflict. It's wrong because it potentially wastes one of WWE's most valuable assets over ego or poor planning. It risks alienating fans who invested in Bron's rise through NXT and his main roster potential. It sends mixed messages about what WWE values in their talent and how they handle internal conflicts. The truth is probably somewhere in the middle. This firing is likely part storyline, part legitimate backstage negotiation, part creative reset, and part publicity stunt. That's how modern wrestling works. Everything is layered with multiple meanings and purposes. What matters now is what happens next. If Bron returns stronger and more focused than ever, if this leads to the main event push he deserves, if WWE commits to making him a top star rather than just another guy, then this firing will be remembered as the moment Bron Breakker became untouchable. But if he comes back and gets slotted right back into the mid-card with no significant elevation, if this was all for shock value with no long-term planning, if WWE wastes this opportunity the way they've wasted so many others, then this will go down as one of the biggest missed opportunities in recent memory. I'm choosing to be cautiously optimistic because Bron Breakker is too talented, too young, and too valuable for WWE to completely screw this up. But I've been disappointed before, and I'm not holding my breath. If you made it this far in the video, you're a true member of the Wrestling Newsletter family, and I need you to do 3 things right now. First, smash the like button if you think WWE either made a huge mistake or if you think this is all part of a genius storyline. Second, drop a comment telling me whether you think Bron deserved to be fired or if Adam Pearce is the real villain in this story. And third, subscribe to this channel because we're going to be covering every development in the Bron Breakker saga as it unfolds. This story is far from over, and you don't want to miss a single update.